Hey, one more thing before you go. How do you overcome parent abandonment, eating disorders, alcoholism, domestic and sexual violence? Well, we have a conversation with a woman that experienced all of that. And through determination, faith, and resilience, she was able to create an environment and the tools dedicated to helping those individuals that are victims of sex trafficking and domestic violence. We're going to give you those tools to escape those circumstances yourself or to help someone you know. I'm your host, Michael Herst. Welcome to One More Thing Before You Go. My guest in this episode is Stephanie Olson. She's a speaker and author and the chief executive officer of the Set Me Free Project. It's a prevention education organization on human trafficking, social media safety, and healthy relationships. She's on a mission to share that each person has an intrinsic value that cannot be changed. I'm excited about sharing this knowledge, this wisdom, and everything that goes along with it. Living with years of parent abandonment, eating disorders, alcoholism, domestic and sexual violence, she overcame through determination, faith, resilience, and she turned her trauma into triumph. And we're going to share her story. As the co-founder of the Set Me Free Project, Stephanie has been able to grow a nonprofit from nothing to bringing prevention to thousands of you by teaching them that they have an intrinsic value that no one can change. She's the host of Being Resilient podcast. And welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's great to be here.
I'm very happy to have you on the show. I'm really looking forward to sharing your, like I said earlier, sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience, and helping others that we can hopefully inspire, motivate, educate them to know that they are important and they need to take a look at themselves and understand that they have to love themselves and take the courage to move forward.
Right.
So
Yeah, absolutely. So important.
yeah, I appreciate you being here. As we said right before we started recording this wonderful conversation today, I'd like to begin at the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I was born in Bloomington, Illinois, grew up early on in Western Springs, LaGrange, those suburbs of Chicago, and eventually moved to Littleton, Colorado, and Lincoln, Nebraska, which I kind of call home. We've since moved to Omaha, my husband and I, but Nebraska's been my home for a long time.
Now to go from Colorado to Nebraska, and I'm a Colorado boy. That's my home. That's
Mm-hmm.
my home state. I grew up there. So when I say this, uh, with all due respect, because
Yes.
I don't know why I did it. Well, I know why I did. I came down here to get a surgeon, but I moved from there to the Phoenix area, which is like desert.
Yeah.
And my wife
Yeah.
and I are still asking ourselves, why did we leave the mountains and the trees and the green? Just just the fact that it's green
Yeah.
down here. But thank you for being a Colorado resident for a little bit. That gives us a little more connection.
Absolutely. Yes.
I appreciate that. Um,
Yeah. I didn't have much choice. My parents moved me, so I moved along with them, but I am now grateful that I am here. It's
oh, that
very green
works.
in Nebraska too, so I got that going for me.
Well, speaking of parents, what were your parents like?
Well, interestingly enough, I was born to a very abusive biological father. My mom has always been incredibly wonderful, but she was very young and very insecure when she met and then married my biological father. And so that really started out the trajectory of my life, having that abuse in my childhood. And it was the first year my mom actually escaped from that relationship, which is phenomenal. But as a little girl who, wants to be daddy's little girl, I never had my biological father do anything to find me, to send me a birthday card, no holiday cards. He was gone. And so as a little girl who is always looking for, gosh, I am I I'm not even worthy of my own father to love me, to be around me. I must not be worthy. My own biological father to love me, I must not be very lovable. And so that's really how my life began.
You know, that's unfortunate, but sometimes there are blessings in disguise. And
Hmm.
it brought you here to this point where you are sharing your story enough to help
Yep,
others that are going through the same thing, for them to move forward because they may not have that
absolutely.
opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah. We wound up moving into my grandparents' home, which was a great thing because my grandparents were incredibly loving and supportive. But my mom was young. She wasn't around early on. And then she married my dad, who I refer to as my dad. I always make a distinction between my biological father and my dad because any male can be a father, but it really does take a special man to be a dad.
It does, and
Yeah.
I have to say this: stepfathers don't you don't have to be you don't have to be blood to be family.
No, you don't. You absolutely do not. And he adopted me when I was 6. Um, but he had an instant family. Here
Right.
he was with a wife and a child at 31 years old. And so, again, that desire to be daddy's little girl, he didn't know how to do that.
Right.
Human, great, great man, great dad. But I wanted something he just didn't have the ability to give.
The stepfather or the father,
Mhm,
your step
my dad,
your
my
dad,
stepfather who so he'd be my adopted father.
adoptive father.
Yeah, yep, yep.
I'm forgive me. I was trying to keep up.
No,
Almost
it's
got
hard.
there.
It's confusing, I'll tell you. No,
uh,
he yeah, he was a amazing man, and he really did, he was my dad. He raised me, and loved me, but those first few years of trauma in any child's life are really that's a critical development time for
it is.
children and can really set them on a path of destruction.
Well, I think that, and I understand this from the perspective of going through something similar to you. You
Yeah.
know, when you have that, uh, dare I say, abandonment issue,
Mhm.
you have that fact that that person has left and gone. That creates an environment for mental health,
Yep.
physical ailments, all
Mhm.
down the line. Correct?
Absolutely. And they say that statistically one of the worst, and again, we don't label trauma. Trauma is trauma. But I think sometimes people make light of the abandonment of a parent because unfortunately it happens so frequently. But that is one of the most traumatic things that can happen to a child, of just about everything that might be able to happen. So the abandonment of a parent is really critical.
Yeah. Have you, if I can ask this, have you ever heard
Mhm.
from your biological father?
No, in fact, for years, I wanted to find him and say, "Hey, did it without you. Thanks a lot." Had some other choice words in mind, but years later, I realized because I had all of this anger and resentment towards him, and one day I was driving home and I realized, oh my gosh, you have spent all of this energy hating this man when you have these amazing by this point I was
Mm.
married to my husband and had raised by a wonderful man, my dad. You have these incredible men in your life that have shown you love, have shown you support, have embraced you completely, and yet you have spent all these years focusing on the one who didn't. And I really was able to forgive my biological father, let go of that hurt and pain, and really move forward from that. Now, I was a it was much later in my life through a lot of healing and trauma, but years later, after that, was doing the ancestry thing and found his death certificate. So he died several years ago.
It's interesting
Mhm.
that path. Do you think that caused? I know that you've got your dad raised you, and you got love from this individual and some nurturing.
Mhm.
But prior to that, did that cause any kind of disorders, eating disorders, or mental health issues, or things like that? I
All
know
the
that
things.
all those things, all those things. Well,
All the things, yep.
I know that you talk about alcoholism and domestic and
Mhm.
sexual violence.
Mhm.
I'm assuming during your pastime, can we talk about those, how those came about, and what you
Yeah.
did to kind of recognize where you were?
Absolutely. I think that I kind of became the cliche looking for love in all the wrong places and really didn't feel a sense of control in my life. And so in middle school, so seventh and eighth grade, I developed a couple of eating disorders, anorexia and bulimia, and would go between starving myself and getting really small and then binging and purging. And so really just trying and eating disorders are all about just gaining some sort of control, a
Right.
semblance of control. If I can control nothing else in my life, I can control this. And went through a lot of years struggling with that. And it was in high school that I found alcohol. And I think that there are two different types of alcoholics. This is just my personal opinion, but I think there are the kind of alcoholics that are predisposed to alcoholism. So they are born with that predisposition towards alcoholism, and that first drink kind of sets them on a path. And then there are the kinds that are habitual alcoholics. They become alcoholics from habitual use. I was definitely that predisposed young one because every day at 4 o'clock sharp, my grandparents would have a Manhattan every single day. And I wanted that maraschino cherry soaking in the Manhattan. I could have gone and got the one out of the fridge, but that's not the one I wanted. I wanted the one soaking in the Manhattan. And when I was 16 and really had my first drunk, that night I blacked out. So my very first drunk, I blacked out. And I always looked at drinking a little bit differently than my friends. I always wanted the next I was always looking forward to the next drink. When are we going to get that next drunk? And it was just always very different. So I really see a lot of generational things there. And as I told you, I found my biological father's death certificate. He actually died of alcoholism.
Yeah, that's interesting. My both my parents were alcoholics, so I empathize
Mm,
with you in regard to that.
yeah.
My father died when I was 17 years old. He died of esophageal cancer and
Oh,
cirrhosis of the liver.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Bad alcoholic from that perspective. And I when we grew up in those environments, um,
Hmm.
we we started taking lessons at an early age. You see, when
Sure.
your dad gets angry, he goes and drinks. When he gets sad, he goes and drinks.
Hmm.
If he's happy, hey, let's have a drink. You kind of get to relate those, and this is just from my personal experience. You kind of get to
Right.
you understand to start relating that each time you have an emotion, you go to drink. You get depressed, you go get a drink. You get angry, you go
Mhm.
get a drink. You get happy, go get a drink. You're celebrating that you're not angry and
Yeah.
not depressed. And it's kind of a
Right.
never ending cycle. And I
Right.
know that we as children sometimes get stuck in that cycle
Yeah.
and only understand it from that perspective. I was lucky. I kind of looked at it, I was the middle child. So to me, I ended up having to call in for my parents when they couldn't go to work. I had to
Uh,
take them the aspirin and the water and you know, everything to kind of take care of them instead of them
yeah.
take care of me.
That's
I had
sad.
a younger brother and an older sister. My older sister moved out, so it was kind of left to me from that perspective.
Yeah.
So it creates an environment that you either go one way
Yeah.
sometimes or you go the other way. My
Hmm.
brother went the other way, the opposite direction from me,
Yeah.
kind of a
Yeah.
situation. So, at what point did you recognize that that there was an issue there, that you had a problem that you probably needed to work with?
It was a long time. So
Oops.
I had I married my first husband through a lot of drunken dating. That was early on in my life. I was young. Had gone through a lot of that's when I had gone through a lot of the sexual violence that I experienced through high school and through college. Um, and then married my abusive husband at the time, and he was a drug dealer. That's always a bad sign when you're dating a drug dealer. But I think that through that time, my drinking really never let up. My eating disorders were still going full force, and so there was a lot of trauma, a lot of abuse in that relationship. I left him 2 years later, and by the grace of God, met and married my husband today, and I don't even know how that happened because healthy attracts healthy, and I was definitely not healthy at that point. But I was drinking every day, and, it wasn't until my daughter was about 18 months old that I really started to recognize I need to do something different. And one day I put her to bed. This wasn't even the catalyst, but I put her to bed and I woke up the next morning and there was red wine all over her changing table, all over her crib. And even that wasn't enough for me to say, I'm done with this. So it was truly by the grace of God that I decided that I needed help. And I really thought at first, I just need to cut back. I want somebody to help me cut back, and called a self help group that they don't do that, don't help you cut back. And it was just a journey of becoming sober and recognizing that, yeah, this was an issue. Because I was a very functioning alcoholic.
Yeah, there's a growing up with it. Number one, in my previous
Mm.
career, as everybody knows, you observe functioning alcoholics, and you observe
Yeah.
individuals that have drank for the first time, as well as individuals that over drank for the first
Yes.
time. A lot of times, um, at yeah, at I know that you so going through this journey. When you recognize, how did you finally get some help? I know you reached out to some help, self-help groups. They didn't.
Yep.
They didn't help you. Did you have to go into Alcoholics Anonymous? Did you go to a rehab
Well,
program?
yeah,
How'd you get some
it,
help?
it it was AA that I called, and they actually did help me, but it was a process. I had decided because I had in my mind I wasn't an alcoholic.
Right.
I didn't drink out of a bag. I wasn't drinking under a bridge. I mean, there were all these mindsets that I had of what an alcoholic looked like. And I
Society
did
does.
what I was yeah, exactly. I was a stay-at-home mom. I was not, doing these crazy things that would be in our mindsets. And so it took me a long time to recognize that I might have a problem. And the word alcoholic didn't even come into my mind at first. And so I would do little things to try and cut back, like, okay, well, I'm only going to drink at home. And then there would be I was
Mhm.
home all the time. I'm only gonna drink it going out for dinner, and then I'd make sure we were out every night of the week. I'm only gonna drink special occasions, and then there'd be a good Oprah on a Tuesday, and that was special enough. It was all of these excuses, and when I called finally, and there was no big thing that happened. Somebody asked me the other day, "What was the big thing that happened in your life that made you
Right.
stop drinking?" And there wasn't. There wasn't, just these tuggings of, I know this isn't my best. And I called AA and said, "Can you help me cut back?" And they said, "No, we don't do that." So I went to a meeting, and it was a meeting in a really rough part of town, but it was at lunchtime. And I thought, oh, we're going to have, it's it's going to be business people and it's going to be good. And I went and sat down and looked around and I thought, "Oh my gosh, where am I?" And I started to listen to people talk. And there was a guy who said, "You know, I was on heroin. I stole all my roommate's furniture and sold it, and then I realized and I thought, "Oh my gosh, okay, that's not my story." But what I heard were the similarities. I never heard the differences. And I went home to my husband and I said, that was good, but I don't think that this is for me." And he said, "Well, why don't you try a meeting close to home, see what you think." So I went on a Wednesday night, which is traditionally church night, and it was at a church, and I was just mortified. I thought, "Oh, it's choir night. People are going to be doing the church thing." I walked in and I saw three women that were just beautifully dressed, and again, it's that off perception, that stereotype, and they walked in and one of them I knew, and I was just dying inside. And one of the women looked at the sign that was up and it said AA and it gave the room number and she pointed at it and said, "Okay, we're going to this room." And I was shocked because I thought there's no way they're going to an AA meeting. And I looked at both of them and I said, or all three of them, and just stunned. And one of them said, "Is this your first meeting?" And I said, "It's my second." And those women took me under their wing. One of them became my sponsor. And I found out they had never been to that meeting before, never went since. I mean, that was just God dropping them right where I needed them at that moment.
Right place, right time. That's great.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. And
sometimes
that's how I quit.
that's an outstanding opportunity for you to change your life. I think
Mhm,
a good turning point,
mhm.
especially
Yeah,
the scene was set perfectly, so where you knew you had some support and support from an unlikely source that you never probably
yeah,
expected to have.
yep,
We don't always know. Yeah, that's one advantage. I call it an advantage, but sometimes it was a curse, I guess, a little bit. Is that we don't always know what goes on behind closed doors. In my
yeah,
previous profession, I was privy to what goes on
yeah,
behind closed doors. We saw people at their worst. We saw the best people at their worst. It didn't matter if you were
yeah.
poor, you were middle class, or you were rich. You all went through
Doesn't
the
matter.
same problems, the same issues, the same fights, the same
That's right.
alcoholism, the same drug addiction, the same everything.
Yeah,
And nobody realizes that they may feel that they're separated by divisions within society, but in
mm,
reality, there are others taking the same path as we are taking. So that was
yeah.
brilliant that
I
you
agree.
got the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think those are things that we need to talk more about as a society because we
I
should
agree.
never have to feel like we're completely alone in this because of whatever, name the reason.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. 100% conversation. That every domestic violence case that I ever went to, I
Yeah,
always left with this: communication is the key to success.
absolutely.
Communication will save your marriage, save your relationship. Communication is a
Mhm.
start. Communication will open the door.
Yeah.
Communication. And,
Yeah.
the other thing, and this is your platform at the moment, but I like to throw in there that a lot of times we don't realize it, but we just have to
Mhm.
ask.
Yeah,
People are afraid to
absolutely.
ask.
Yeah, it's true. And they don't and sometimes when they ask, they don't know what to do when they get the answer.
Well,
That
exactly.
they either don't want or yeah, and so I do think communication is everything. Healthy communication, of course, and
Healthy, yes.
learning how to communicate in a way that is, positive and encouraging and supportive, not not without conflict.
Right.
Healthy conflict is important, but having the ability to communicate in a way that is not violent or,
I agree.
um, unhealthy. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's touch base real quick, if you don't mind. I know that in the information that was provided to me, you talk about sexual violence. How did that
Yeah.
affect your life?
Well, I think that is something that actually is very common with women and some men throughout so often. And it's something we a lot of times don't talk about. The first time that I was raped, it was by my boyfriend at the time. And it was clear rape, but I I blamed myself. It was, I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have said this, and whatever the case may be. And then there were about 3 other times throughout college and, in my early adult life that I was raped, but again, blamed myself. I was drunk, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have said this, or whatever the case may be. And so I actually blamed myself so much that I didn't even realize that it was rape until I was in this work doing what I was in a presentation with a trauma therapist. We were both presenting, and it was her turn, and she said something, and I thought, oh my gosh, that was rape. And what was so fascinating to me was that we often say to individuals, most sex trafficked individuals don't even see themselves as trafficked. They don't self identify. And people think, well, how is that even possible? And it is because you make those mental excuses in your head. That was your fault. You were drunk, whatever it may be, or you said okay to whatever. And what we have to recognize is rape is rape is rape, and what that looks like, and really educating our youth about what that looks like as well. So it really affected me very negatively. But it was a little different because I didn't even see it as what it was.
Unfortunately, that in society today, in a lot of environments, not just in the United States, but all across the world,
Yeah,
that is an unfortunate fact.
it is.
As a man, as a father of
Mhm,
daughters, as a husband, as a
mhm.
brother, as a son, and as a friend of many women,
Yeah,
realistically, no means no, and it's not acceptable
right.
in any circumstance, whether you're boyfriend,
Mhm.
girlfriend, a girlfriend, girlfriend, boyfriend, boyfriend, whatever stature in life that you are, if you say
Yeah,
no, it's not acceptable. And if it takes
that's
place,
right.
it is not your fault. That comes from a cop
Right.
too. So
Yeah,
that's an authority figure,
yeah.
retired cop.
I love
Should emphasize that.
I love that. Well,
But
and it is so true. It's not your fault. Yeah,
yeah, it's never your
hard
fault.
to realize. Yeah,
It doesn't matter if even if you go get drunk, that's not your fault. Absolutely not your fault.
right,
That should
right,
not say that, well, if I go get drunk, this is what's going to happen, and that's okay. Doesn't work that
right.
way, kind of a
No.
situation. So, yeah, first and foremost, no. You
Yeah.
mentioned trafficking. So, how did you get
Mhm.
involved in human trafficking? I mean, first let me can I preface it with this? Sorry, my mind's going in like
No, you're
all these
good.
different
You're good.
directions. So, you mentioned human trafficking. So let's define what human trafficking is. I understand it, but
Right.
let's define for our audience what human trafficking is.
Absolutely. It is the buying and selling of a human being for the personal profit or gain of another through force, fraud, or coercion. That's the big definition. I think when we look at that and look at the buying and selling of a human being, the foundation of everything I teach wherever I am is you have an intrinsic value that cannot be changed. Because when you recognize someone's intrinsic value, you can't buy them and you cannot sell them. When you're buying and selling a human being, you are looking at them as a product, as a commodity. And of course, there are different forms of human trafficking. Two of the biggest that we see, sex trafficking and labor trafficking, buying and selling of a human being for sex, buying and selling of a human being for work. And so those are the two big forms of human trafficking that we talk about and educate on.
What got you involved in human trafficking? How did you move into that position to be an advocate?
Came in kicking and screaming, actually. I like to say I had been doing a lot of work with women in the area of sexual and domestic violence, addiction, and was traveling, speaking, just having an amazing time working with women. And one of my coworkers at the time said, "Hey, let's help sex trafficked victims." That was a quote. And I thought, sure, really having no idea what that meant. In my mind, it was the movie Taken. You know, you don't send your daughters to Europe by themselves. You're good. If Liam Neeson were their dad, might be a little bit easier for you because he can take down five guys in the kitchen.
Me
This
too.
was my mindset. Yeah, exactly.
Just for
Exactly.
the
This
record, yeah,
was
me too.
a special set of skills, right? This was my
Exactly.
mindset. And that is not what trafficking certainly can happen that way, but that's not what it looks like. And when I researched what was going on in my community, and in Nebraska, here, we're actually a hotspot for trafficking.
Oh,
And
really?
when I realized, yeah, what was going on in my community and that no one was talking to the targets of trafficking, I knew I had to do something. So that's how we got started.
I guess that kind of that yeah, I think it's a larger problem across the world than
Yeah.
what people really realize.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we're discussing this and bringing it out into the open a little bit so that we can understand some things, such as who's at risk for trafficking.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, yeah, to your point, it's $150 billion industry minimally. That was a statistic several years ago. So, I mean, we're talking a lot of money right there. But who is at risk? Our youth are huge targets. I always say anybody is at risk. We see trafficked individuals from infants to senior citizens. That can happen all through all ages, but really, um, youth anywhere between the ages of 12 and 19 is a lot of the average age into entry into trafficking. And there's a myth that it's only girls being trafficked, but boys can be trafficked sometimes up to 50%, this, as much as girls. And so it really depends on each community what you're seeing, but it is not about kidnapping, it's about relationship building. And I think that scariest part, because what kidnapping, hey, just watch out for the white van, don't get too close to strangers. If I asked an eighth grader once, tell me what a predator looks like, and she was like, oh gosh, yeah, predator is like that super old guy in a trench coat, like really old, like 30. I mean, this is what they
30.
think, right? And so if that were the case, it would be so easy to watch for that. But the reality is, our kiddos are spending a whole lot of time on social media. And that's one of the number one places traffickers are luring the individuals they traffic. And so when they have access to the world has access to them.
Yeah, I think that social media is a wonderful aspect of life. It allows us
Hmm.
to stay in communication with each other in an instant, which is has its benefits, but it also has the negative aspect of that. And I think
That's
that
right.
I have watched through, at least from the law enforcement perspective. Obviously, I'm retired, but I do stay in
Yeah,
connection,
sure.
with some of my colleagues and so forth, and watch the trends. And I belong to some law enforcement groups that discuss it. But social media is
Yeah.
kind of a pitfall within that area. I know that they're taking measures to help kind of prevent that, but you and I both know that unfortunately, without making sure and monitoring your children,
Yeah.
without be reasonable.
Hmm.
You can't. How do I say this without making everybody mad? You can
I have no
monitor your
problem making
children.
people.
Yeah, you have to
Yeah,
monitor your
you
children in
have
regard to
to.
social media
Hmm.
because realistically, they can slip through that in any
Right.
point within any of their social media. And
Right.
forgive me, but you know, um, there are dirtbags out there that take
Yeah,
opportunity, and they take that opportunity to the next level. So yeah,
that's
I think
right.
it. And uh, when you got involved with trafficking, you developed the Set Me Free project,
Yeah,
correct?
Set
That
Me Free Project.
in specific with the trafficking and so forth. Um, what kind of trauma does that present to an
Mhm.
individual that's been trafficked, and how difficult is it for to grab them out of that situation?
That's a great question. Only 1 to 2% of trafficked individuals are recovered or rescued. That's a staggering low number, 1 to 2%.
Too low.
And so, yeah, that's why we as a mission want to prevent it before it starts. Our goal is to stop trafficking before it starts. And the trauma that these individuals experience is layers upon layers upon layers of trauma. And it is truly a lifetime of recovery and restoration. And, we see the trauma that domestic violence displays, we see the trauma that sexual violence displays. But so double that, I mean, add all of those layers on top of those betrayal, and it's extreme trauma. And even in a short amount of time, there was a young gal who was trafficked here, and she was only with her trafficker for 3 days before she was recovered. And that's a really short amount of time. When mom found her, went into the hospital to see her, she was so traumatized that mom didn't even recognize her. I mean, it can be very, very brutal traumatization, but so much of it is emotional and coercive.
Well, and I think society, and when I say this, I'm not when I put it from this perspective, because I've seen it from
Mhm.
both. I've seen it from that side. I've seen it from the law
Yes.
enforcement
Yes.
side.
Right.
People watch TV and they see the pimp, quote unquote,
Mhm.
but they don't understand
Mhm.
that what happens to the individual that the pimp has control over,
Right.
and it goes a lot deeper than just the pimp.
Mhm.
What you see on TV.
Sure does.
It is a very intricate network of
Yeah.
individuals that
Yep.
perpetuate this opportunity to sell this product.
Correct. It's a big business. And I always say, traffickers have big networks. We need to have bigger ones.
Yeah,
Traffickers build amazing relationships. We need to build better ones. And I think those are the number one way to prevent human trafficking is building relationships and teaching people how to do that, teaching people how to be
right.
safe adults. And those are just such key things. TV has sensationalized this. And, we
Yeah,
see all these stories, but it is happening in our own backyard, our neighbors are, and I think that's the one thing that if I could get across to everybody, it's not those other people that are at risk. It's your kids, your grandkids, and it's in your home because of social media.
absolutely, 100%. When they had the Super Bowl down here, luckily
Yeah,
there was a task force that specifically dealt with trafficking that was
yeah,
down here. And because of that, the Super Bowl came to town, and
yeah.
they immediately were activated, and that task force showed up here in order
That's
to,
awesome.
to grab who they could, and to shut
Yeah,
it down, and
right.
take the perpetrators into custody. I have to be careful because sometimes I'll go back to talking like a cop, and I
That's all
have it.
right. I talk to a lot of cops, so I like it.
Yeah, we have a few other choice words for them too. So,
Yeah, I'm sure.
uh, but
Yeah.
I try to keep it a little clean on the show. But I think you get my drift.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
um,
you've seen a lot. You've seen a lot, and it's hard, I think, to when you see that kind of evil. first of all, it's hard to comprehend. But I think then it's hard to maintain that. I always tell
The
people
calm.
it's war the call yes, it's warm in the sand. When we have our heads in the sand, it's nice, it's calm, it's dark, it feels good.
Yep.
But, we do have to take it out and look around. And I think that that is the one thing. And again, I know I said this last time we spoke a while ago, but thank you so much for your service, because
I appreciate
you
that. Thank
truly
you.
are on the front lines. And it is so critical. And to have, good people like you who were in law enforcement and who still are today in areas, I mean, that's just so critical
Well,
in
I
all
wish
of
I
the
could do
things we're
more. I
talking
mean,
about.
there's colleagues of mine that actually, there's some retired cops that actually
Mhm.
created a group, and I'm sure you're probably aware of them across the country. There are several of them that specifically go after traffickers and trying to recover
Mhm.
individuals from that perspective.
Right, right.
I'm not physically able to do that, or I'd be in the middle of that. But I get to do stuff like
Yeah,
this and spread
that's
the
right.
word. Um,
Everybody can play a part. Yep.
so that your motivation, what was your motivation for getting the Set Me Free project in place to help other individuals with this?
Yeah, part of my motivation was youth. I didn't really have a strong passion for trafficking, per se,
Right.
and I think that what it was I saw that youth were really being taken advantage of, all of those vulnerable populations. And, I always say that vulnerability isn't a weakness necessarily. It can be, but
Right.
sometimes it's just our age. We
Yeah.
all have a prefrontal cortex, and that is our decision maker, and that is fully developed when we'll quiz you here, Michael. When is that fully developed? Our decision
Pro-
maker.
Probably 40, maybe
It's
later.
now maybe it's like 25 to
Uh,
30 for women. It's 50 for men. No, I'm kidding. It's 25 to 30
I,
for all of
I'm
us.
still a kind of a kid at heart, but I won't tell anybody.
Yeah. So even just our age can be a vulnerability. And that's not a weakness, that's just a part of who we are. But it could also be, hey, I just posted something really stupid on social media and somebody takes advantage of it. So I think in working with youth, and I had also in my work with women, I'd also spoken to youth on the topic of healthy relationships, and just seeing some of the trauma that they experience, some of the pain. And if I could just do anything to help prevent that, was what really inspired me.
Yeah, that's a positive thing. Now, the Set Me Free Project is a nonprofit organization.
Correct. Yeah. And I would say we're unique in the mindset. Every piece of curriculum when we started out was very fear based. And, whatever you do, don't do this, or all those things. And we don't want to say anything lighthearted about trafficking because it's a horrible subject, which is true.
Right.
But what I noticed was none of the curriculum was written for youth. And none of the curriculum was written in a way that, and at this time that I found, that was palatable. And so I wrote a curriculum specifically for youth that was engaging, that helped them with critical
Mhm.
thinking skills, that was fun despite the topic. And I always say we take our topic very seriously, we don't take ourselves very seriously. And so a lot of humor in that. And that's how we started. We started with a middle school and a high school curriculum, and then we had a parent curriculum. And then we expanded to educator. And now we have a curriculum from kindergarten through 12th grade for youth, college age students, and then adults of all kinds, industry, all different industries,
Mhm.
professions, and just really that education piece. Because if we can truly prevent it from happening, think of all of those costs of restoration and trauma and mental illness that we could
Mhm.
save from really keeping our kiddos safe and protected and in a frame of mind that is, yeah, I'm pretty awesome. I have incredible value and that makes me special. So, yeah.
That's a brilliant opportunity for us as individuals, human beings, to be able to
Mm,
show our children who are gifts to us, how to
yes.
value themselves and to recognize that and to move them forward in a very positive way. So,
Yes.
kudos. Thank you for
Yeah,
that. I appreciate that.
absolutely. And
Um,
now we get our curriculum in the hands of counselors, teachers, wherever, and just train them to really present this curriculum in a way that can benefit kiddos. So we can take it anywhere.
that's a great thing. That's an absolutely great thing. I know that you. Um, we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any tips or some things that parents
Mhm.
first? Can we break this up into two quick little things?
Sure.
As a parent, what kind of signs should we watch for them? Because
Sure.
we were talking earlier about monitoring our kids
Yeah.
and our grandkids.
Mhm.
What signs as a parent or a grandparent or a guardian need to look for to make sure that their child is not getting close to this?
Yeah.
Whoops, just a
So
second.
trafficking.
One second.
Oh, yep.
Wrong button. Okay, take
Dang
two.
old non-readers. So, trafficking is a grooming process. And so, traffickers spend time grooming the individuals they traffic, could be for a very long period of time, could be a year or more. And we see that quite a bit. And so, some of the things to watch for are now your kiddo's got somebody in their life. Maybe you don't know a whole lot about, maybe you don't even know who they are, but they're spending time with somebody. Maybe they're older. This could be their new romantic partner. This could be a friend. And then they get gifts that you wouldn't typically be able to afford, or you see them with money during the grooming process, things they might want and are being used to entice them to, hey, this is great stuff. Um, Looking for things like, okay, this is their typical as a teenager. Now they're not doing this typical, whether it be the way they look, the way they talk, their grades, going to school regularly, whatever their typical is, now it's not so typical. And looking for those kind of changes. Sometimes it could be falling asleep in class. We know that, could be a kid that's gaming and up all night, but are they falling asleep in class because they're being sold? Uh, I think one of the big misconceptions is that if your kiddo is being trafficked, they're not in your home anymore, or they've been taken and they've been moved. But we had a young girl here, high school. She was going to school every day, getting straight A's. And she would come home, do her afternoon job. She would do her homework, and she was getting pimped out or sold by her quote unquote boyfriend every night and living with mom and dad none the wiser. So, trafficking can happen literally right under our noses, and we need to make sure that we're looking for some of those signs. But also, who is following them on social media? Social media is not a bad thing, but we have to help them safely navigate it. And so, making sure that you're helping them while they're under your roof, learn how to safely navigate social media, look at who's following them, because sometimes there'll be all these people following me. I don't even know who they are. So, having those conversations. So, how do you know this person? Tell me the story about how you met this person. And then, if they don't know them, I mean, really know them, then, let's talk about maybe it's not a good idea to have someone follow you that you don't know because of, what you're posting or whatever the case may be. But those are some of the biggest signs, a change from typical to atypical, a presence of an older boyfriend, girlfriend, friend, extra money, cash, maybe things like that. And a lot of times it's a kiddo, it looks like runaway situation, so to speak. And the kiddo runs for a while and then is home, leaves for a while and then is home. And so it could look like a number of different things like that. But those are some of the big signs to watch out for.
Those are a brilliant list. Next question that I think that we should be able to educate those individuals listening and hopefully help them to recognize what
Yeah.
may take place or what's going to take place. What do you recognize? What kind of tips would you give a kid, a child? And when I
Mm,
say child, that could be anyone
yeah,
anyone under the age of 18 years old. But I
right.
also think it also applies to other individuals that may be 18 to 25
That's
or
right.
more because they're in college. So, do you have any
Yeah.
tips for them to kind of start watching how somebody might approach them
Yeah.
to be groomed?
Absolutely. Yeah, again, social media is probably the number one way that it's happening, and that seems so benign because this is a person following me, they may not make contact for quite a while, and when they do, it may just be, "Oh, cool, they liked my post," and maybe they like it again, or they make a comment, and now this is somebody who is starting to connect with me. So you're targeted, this is kind of the grooming process, and then they start to build your trust. Maybe it's as simple as, oh gosh, you like chocolate cake, so do I. I love chocolate cake. Oh, you've always wanted to go, yeah, that's where I would love to vacation. And just start building a connection, building that trust. And then it's filling a need. Now, that need could be, I really want to feel loved. That need could be, hey, I'm starving, I want McDonald's, whatever that need is. Now I am available to fill that need. And if it's love, for example, gosh, you mean everything to me. You're so beautiful. You're so handsome. I love spending time with you. And then it is isolating. Now, that isolation can look like a number of different things. That can look like, hey, your friends, you remember your friends that were around all the time? They're not around anymore because I am the only one who cares about you. I'm the only one who loves you. Your friends don't care about you anymore. Your parents are so controlling. I would never treat you like that. And that isolation start moving friends and family out of the way, and then all of a sudden they sexualize you as a product. Now, that could be a number of different things, but starting to do that sexualization so that there's desensitization through that. Sometimes that's done through, hey, I want you to dance at this club, or let's take these pictures and post them, or whatever it is. And then I'm going to maintain control. Now, that means now I have had control of you. You may not have even noticed it, but now I keep it because I have, if I do those first three really well that feel good, building trust, filling a need after I target you, then those last three things are going to be much, much easier for me to hold on to that. Now, that grooming process can take a long time. And I think that's the hardest things for kiddos to really grab a hold of. Be in a grooming process for over a year and recognizing then what is a trustworthy person. And that's one of the things we talk about. It's really not about stranger danger. And a lot of times we try and teach kids that roles are really trustworthy. So all teachers are trustworthy. All parents are trustworthy. All pastors are trustworthy. All law enforcement is trustworthy. And the reality is, we know that unfortunately, we have seen the headlines. All teachers are not trustworthy. All coaches are not trustworthy. So it can't be about different roles. It has to be about individuals. So, who is a trustworthy person? And one of the things we talk to kids about is there's always four things that really separate a trustworthy person from a non trustworthy person at some point. And a trustworthy person is someone who will never ask you to do something illegal. A trustworthy person is someone who will never ask you to go against your moral compass. A trustworthy person is someone who will never ask you to keep a secret from your parents or guardians. And a trustworthy person always wants the best for you. And those are ways that we can really determine, is this person in my life somebody I should trust or not?
Outstanding tips. I hope that everybody can take the time to write those down, to recognize them, to take them in, and to share them
Yeah,
with their friends as well, because that way you stay connected. You create a community around you so that you could be
right.
more protected in these type of situations. So, thank you for
Yeah,
sharing those. I really appreciate that.
absolutely.
Um, it's interesting. We mentioned this earlier. We were talking about it, and I took a quick note. You had talked about showing value and worth. Our intrinsic. Let me try it in English. Our intrinsic
Yes.
value within ourselves.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
can we show our kids or those around us their value? How can we do
yeah.
that?
Well, first we need to tell them. We need to tell them that they have incredible value, and then we need to show them. Um, One of the things I always tell parents is, this was the best advice I ever received. As a parent, when your kids walk in the room, your eyes should light up like you have never seen anything so amazing. That when they are in your presence, your time is spent with them. And that's how we show value with anything. I think about our phones. We have our phones on our person at all time. And we know that those have value to us because, for heaven's sake, we're never away from them. And not that you have to be with your kids 110% of the time, but it's that showing them that you are priority to me right now. That if I'm having dinner with you, we're going to talk and look at each other. My mom always tells, this was pre-phones, but my brother, who was young at the time, said, "Mom, I want to talk to you." And she was doing something, and she said, "Okay, okay." And he said, "No, Mom, I really want to talk to you." And she said, "I'm listening." And he grabbed her face and turned it to him, and he said, "No, really, I need you to listen to me." And I think sometimes as parents, we forget that we're so busy. I mean, we're just busy human beings, and we need to stop and make sure our kids know that they are a priority. And that is, I had a little boy, I'll tell you a quick story. Um, One of the boys we were educating, he was listening to our presentation. I think it was in middle school. And at the end of our presentation, he approached our educator and said, "No one has ever told me I have value. I have never heard that in my
Wow.
life." And so as they began to talk, it turned out that he was in an extremely abusive home. He was being abused sexually by a family member. And so, of course, we had to report it,
Right.
and we walked him through that. Now, usually we never know what happens after that because we report it, it's confidential, we move back. And this kiddo emailed us and said, "Hey, just wanted to let you know they did take me from my home, and that was scary, but I am safe for the
Mm.
first time in my life, and
Well
that's
done.
because of you. Thank
Well,
you."
yeah, well
And
done.
then he emailed us a month later and said, "Hey, it's my birthday, and I'm having a birthday because of you." And that's why we do what we do.
Well done. Outstanding. Well done. I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
I taking individuals away from those situations.
Yeah.
This sounds very strange, but I enjoy doing that. It made
Yeah. Yeah.
it made me feel good every time I was able to take an individual
Yeah.
out of that situation and place them in a
A
more positive
traumatic house.
environment for themselves.
Yep.
It tell me that I was doing my job and I
Yeah.
enjoyed that part of my job. It kind of
That's awesome.
it's a little
It's
selfish right
hard.
there, but it's hard.
Yeah, I
It's
love it.
hard.
It's hard for the kids, it's hard for, but, what a great thing for kiddos when they are in a safe place for the first time.
Absolutely. So yeah, well
Yeah,
done.
yeah,
Let's talk about everything you have to offer, because we
Yeah.
didn't get the opportunity to talk about your speaking, your consulting. I'm sorry. We got
Yeah.
so involved in this other
It's
conversation, but
okay.
you've got a podcast, you've got a couple of books out, and you've got a consulting service. So
Yeah.
can let's share that with the world. Tell me about all of that,
Yeah, absolutely.
and how to get a hold
So
of you, please.
absolutely. So I do love to speak. I speak on a lot of topics all over, of course, human trafficking and healthy relationships, but I also speak on resilience and trauma and even in the corporate world, how we can take our trauma and turn that into a triumphant situation. And so all of those things. And I love to train. People, women's events, whoever. If you let me talk to you, I will do that. And I do love consulting businesses on some of the those human resource type things, that trauma and moving in a positive direction as a leader. So you can find me on that front at stephanieolson.com. And I love to connect with people. Please do not hesitate. That's where you can also find my podcast, Resilience in Life and Leadership, and my books. So stephanieolson.com. And then definitely check us out at setmefreeproject.net. Anything human trafficking, social media, and healthy relationships. But we would love to give you the opportunity to get our curriculum in your hands, in your schools, in your communities. And we also do a lot of educational webinars. And so we're happy to train parents and community members and educators, whoever. Again, whoever will listen to me talk, I will talk to.
This works. It sounds like an open door
Yes,
opportunity. Um,
absolutely.
Stephanie, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate you sharing the
Great.
wisdom and your experience and your journey and getting where you have come from and where you're at now. I think that you're doing an amazing job in helping people
Thank
move
you.
their lives forward in a very positive way. So thank you for being part of this community and for being a human being right here with us.
Thank you.
This is one more thing before you go. So before we go, do you have any words of wisdom that we haven't shared, maybe?
Well, I just want to thank you for what you're doing. I love that you're shining a light on all these amazing things that are so important for people to know. And any of us can be caught in a situation that does not feel right. And so if you ever need help, reach out until you get the help you need.
Brilliant words of wisdom. Thank you very much. Again, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
everything with us. And I hope that we can have another conversation down the road.
Let's do it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go. Check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.